This week on Shadowed Longings, the year I tried not to be gay, and the men I couldn't forget. Chapter 2, The Pilot and the Monk.
I met Josh in the unlikeliest of places. A man whose grounded masculinity and quiet, magnetic presence stirred both attraction and ache in me, something I felt in my body before I could explain it in words, which made the irony hard to miss. I encountered him at the very place I thought desire was supposed to disappear, an ex-gay conference. I learned early how to read rooms, not in an obvious way, just a quiet, constant scanning, an instinctive sweep for who felt safe, who felt familiar, who might see me without demanding anything I couldn't give. I moved through the world like that, measuring distance, monitoring exposure, deciding which parts of myself stayed covered. I didn't think of it as hiding so much as managing risk, like a man who knew how powerful he might be without the mask, and how much damage that power could do if revealed too soon. Ex-gay conferences were full of men like me, ballrooms and hotel meeting rooms crowded with restraint. Men who spoke fluently about discipline and growth while keeping their attractions constantly in check. Men who longed for touch but resisted affection. Men who laughed easily and went quiet just as quickly. I told myself I was there for clarity, for accountability, for help, but my body knew the truth before my mind did. There were hosts of good-looking guys, but one man stood out to me from across the room. We shared glances. He was different than most of the men there, confident, broad-shouldered, relaxed in a way that didn't feel rehearsed. A military pilot, I later learned. The kind of masculinity that didn't announce itself, didn't need to. Rugged, masculine, trim. I took note, somewhat unconsciously, but no doubt quickly suppressed. When we finally did meet, he smiled and said, "I'm Josh." "Hi, I'm Dave." Something in me sparked, not urgency, not hunger exactly, but recognition. We found ourselves walking outside instead of heading back in for the next session on healing father wounds, which was a common and popular theme at the conference. "So, what do you fly?" I asked. "F-16s, he said casually, as if that were the same as saying, a Honda. "Of course you do," I replied. He glanced over. "What does that mean?" "It means," I said, "while the rest of us are trying to manage our feelings with small group discussions, you're breaking the sound barrier." He smirked. "It's mostly paperwork." "I'm sure," I said. "Very aggressive paperwork." He laughed under his breath. "I just mean," I added, softer now, "you don't exactly look like someone who ends up at a conference like this." He held my gaze a beat longer than necessary. "What's someone who ends up here supposed to look like?" I hesitated, less composed. That earned a half smile. "You'd be surprised." We kept walking, talking about travel, interests, family, brushing lightly, cautiously toward what had brought us both here. I kept catching myself looking at him. He was grounded, unmistakably masculine. No visible fracture, no outward sign of confusion. Not the picture I had quietly constructed of someone who would sit in folding chairs under fluorescent lights, trying to pray themselves straight. Our path led us to a wide oak tree. We sat beneath it, close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from his arm. I became suddenly aware of the pull toward him, the strength in his frame, the steady rise and fall of his chest, the quiet gravity of his presence. My body registered what my theology was still attempting to categorize. Around us, men moved between buildings discussing strategies, testimonies, accountability groups, same conference, same vocabulary. But our conversation kept drifting, sideways, warmer. "How are you doing being here?" I asked before I could stop myself. He leaned back against the tree and exhaled. "Honestly, always a risky word," I said. He rubbed his hands together, staring at the grass. "A lot of this father wound stuff." I nodded. The mantra. Same-sex attraction as the echo of a distant father. Masculinity not affirmed, something missing. They keep saying it's broken attachment. he continued, that we're just trying to repair something. And do you buy that? I asked. He shrugged. My dad and I weren't close. Military family. Not a lot of hugs. So yeah, on paper it works. I felt that reflex inside me. The trained agreement. The framework I had studied, defended, repeated. Mine wasn't perfect either, I said. There's always something you can trace. He looked at me carefully. But does that mean this, he gestured subtly between us, is just a repair project? The air shifted. I knew the right answer. I could have delivered it cleanly. Brokenness, healing, discipline, celibacy, faithfulness. Instead, I chose my words like I was writing a theological footnote. I think it's possible to have real wounds and still not reduce everything to them. He didn't look away. A lot of men have distant fathers and don't end up at conferences like this, I added. He smiled faintly. True. And some men, I said, allowing a thread of humor to steady me, had decent dads and still somehow missed the heterosexual exit ramp. That made him laugh, fully this time. The sound caught in my chest. But the laughter faded, and what remained felt heavier. But I hesitated. The devoted traditional Christian side of me stepped forward, firm and practiced. I also believe obedience matters. Faithfulness matters, even when it costs you. He nodded, not mocking, not dismissing. I've built my life around that, I continued, aware of how close our knees were. Around not letting desire be the loudest voice in the room. And is it? He asked gently. My throat tightened. Usually, I said. But sometimes I wonder if I've confused volume with truth. The confession hung there before I could retract it. He studied me, something unreadable in his expression. That sounds exhausting, he said quietly. It builds character, I replied. Very on brand for a seminarian. A celibate seminarian who lived like a monk, I thought. He smiled. Slower now, I swallowed. If I stop joking, I said, my voice lower than before, I might start confessing. His eyes held mine. Not playful now, steady. Maybe that wouldn't be the worst thing, he said. And something electric moved between us. Not dramatic, not theatrical, but unmistakable. A recognition, a shared awareness that this wasn't theoretical. It wasn't a father wound. It wasn't a case study. It was proximity, breath, heat, curiosity. An Air Force pilot and a monk, both highly trained, both disciplined, both fluent in restraint, and sitting under a Tennessee oak tree pretending we were here to learn how to stop wanting what we were very clearly beginning to feel. Neither of us moved. Neither of us suggested going back inside. I leaned back against the tree, eyes closed, enjoying the gentle breeze rustle the leaves. And for a moment, the world narrowed. The hum of distant voices fading, the heat of the Tennessee afternoon settling around us like a held breath. My eyes drifted downward before I could stop them. The solid line of his waist, the quiet rise of his chest, the undeniable presence of him beside me. The awareness was immediate, physical, undeniable. In the private theater of my mind, restraint loosened. I imagined shifting closer, resting my head in his lap, the steady warmth of his body beneath my cheek. The quiet strength in him no longer theoretical but felt. I could almost sense his hand hovering, unsure, then settling gently on my chest. Not claiming, not urgent, just present. I glanced up at him in that suspended, imagined moment. His face softened, the guarded edges gone. He leaned toward me slowly, deliberately, as if crossing a boundary neither of us had language for. And in that fragile space between breath and decision, his lips met mine. Not hurried, not hungry, but real and devastating. The kind of kiss that collapses explanations. The kind that rewrites the room. Footsteps. Dave? The voice cracked my dream state like glass. I opened my eyes, but there had been no movement, no hand on my chest, no kiss. Just the oak tree, the Tennessee heat, and Josh sitting beside me exactly as before. My friend Graham, who I'd come to the conference with from back home, stood a few yards away smiling politely, unaware he had just interrupted an entire world. "Hey," he said, walking closer. "We were wondering where you disappeared to." Next session starting, reality rushed back in, structured, watchful, corrective. I straightened, clearing my throat, my pulse louder than it should have been. "Yeah," I said, steadying my voice. "We were just talking." Josh nodded quietly. The moment, imagined, electric, impossible, folded itself back into silence. But something had shifted, and I knew it. The weekend ended the way those weekends always did, with guarded confessions and men speaking about surrender as if desire could be filed down by enough discipline. Josh and I kept crossing paths until the final goodbye. Nothing happened, not really. No touch that could be named, no words that crossed the line, just a look held too long, silence that said more than either of us dared. A feeling I would spend the next several months trying to reclassify as spiritual concern, masculine admiration, brotherly affection, anything but what it was. When we finally parted, he pulled me into a brief embrace. "Take care of yourself," he said, but it was the way he said it that stayed with me. Low, steady, personal, as if he were saying something underneath the words. I watched him walk away and felt that old, familiar split open inside me again. The man of covenant and the man of longing, each certain he was telling the truth. Back home, I tried to return to the script: prayer, restraint, obedience, keep moving, keep it clean, keep it buried. But some encounters do not end when the weekend ends. They wait. They deepen in absence. They grow teeth in silence. And then, later that fall, his name appeared in my inbox. "I'm back home in Colorado now," he wrote. "If you ever find yourself out this way, you should come visit." I read the message once, then again, and somewhere beneath all my theology, beneath the covenant, beneath the disciplined Christian man I was still trying to be, one dangerous thought rose without permission. What if I go?
Next time on Shadowed Longings, Chapter 3, A Bed Big Enough.
A trip to Colorado opens the door to something deeper than friendship. In the quiet closeness of shared space, lingering looks, and a bed big enough for two, the ache I thought I could manage begins to take on a life of its own.
Shadowed Longings is a production of the Good Life Lab with Dr. Dave, where queer stories meet the science and psychology of a good life.